Hello, happy Christmas. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you, Eddie. Happy Christmas to you.
Now, I know you've done more than I have, some preparation for this. You've been having a think about the most talked about things of the year and the most important things to you.
I have, well, sort of. I mean, some of the answers are fairly obvious. We speak now of Brexit in a completely different climate from the climate in which we've been speaking about it for the last 3.5 years. So,
well, we're recording this on December the 11th. You're predicting a Labour landslide. I don't think it's going to go that way.
Oh, well, watch and learn, Mair. Watch and learn.
I still see a Lib Dem surge.
Swinson for PM.
Prime Minister Swinson.
Yes.
Vince Cable in the cabinet. What a time it's going to be.
Yeah, and it has obviously been a huge feature of my programme. I mean, everybody's programme, but perhaps the Remain perspective more so on mine than elsewhere. And it is odd now that we look in the rear-view mirror for the purposes of this programme, but the road ahead, Brexit's not going to be, or at least remaining in the European Union, isn't simply not on the road or indeed the horizon.
How did you absorb the exit poll?
I thought the likelihood of Boris Johnson's Conservatives not getting a majority was vanishingly slim. I'd invested some optimism in the notion of tactical voting, but not much, because it just doesn't play outside of certain constituencies of people, not geographical constituencies. But I didn't see 80 coming. I in an unguarded moment with a very good friend, I said 40. At the absolute most. So I think like everybody else, whatever their leanings were, I was very surprised by it. And then oddly liberated afterwards, because it does actually mean that the conversations we have at work are much, much clearer. They're not hidebound by, but of course then that could not go through, or if you're talking about the arithmetic of Parliament, you can't make any meaningful predictions, because under a majority the size that Theresa May had, or that Boris Johnson inherited, as Boris Johnson himself demonstrated, the same MP from the same party could vote for and against the same legislation. Everything was so up for grabs. That is not true anymore.
I want to ask about your role in all of this, because I remember a morning, and I don't remember a key detail, which is a bit of a shame, and I shouldn't hit the microphone when I'm talking. They teach you that.
You've done this before
in radio school, and I think it was off that day. It must have been sometime in September or October, and there was one day in the morning. It looked very much like suddenly Remain was never going to be an option, or a referendum was never going to be an option. And suddenly, for a moment, I think it changed that day, but Boris Johnson was in the ascendancy, very much so. And I came into work and I said to you something like, how are you? How are you feeling about this? And you said, I've done all I can.
Yes.
And you seemed and I thought, well, that's very zen. You just seem completely together. And I just wonder, in the new actual reality, the undeniable reality, that is how you feel. As you reflect on this, do you think in your soul, I've done all I can, I did my bit?
I'd like to think, I don't know. I mean, there's part of me that thinks, could you have done more? Because then you'd have got a different result. And you've got that old urban myth about Einstein's definition of insanity, involving doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But I, somewhat pompously, or not, depending on your perspective, I think our job, and I suspect you do too, is to give people the information they need to make informed choices.
Well, you've been doing something different, though. You've been doing something very special.
I have been pointing out to people that they were not given the information that they needed to make informed choices, that they were given false information. And as every chapter ended with, the German car industry not turning up, as Digby Jones knew for certain that it would.
He's the biggest dog in the world.
He's the biggest dog in the world. As the necessity of having some form of checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, if we were to leave the customs union and the single market, as that was established, despite the fact that Boris Johnson continues to deny it, as all of the Brexit-related untruths, exaggerations, embellishments, or downright lies emerged, because so much of the media had been invested in telling people to vote for Brexit, the print media, and where they lead, often we follow. I felt, and it's an odd word to use, I felt a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility, despite not being a particularly ardent Remainer in the run-up to June of 2016. I had to tell people what the truth was, and I told them. So, yeah, I did everything I could. They chose, a lot of people chose, and it's not as if the entire country listens to my programme, but, you know...
It's getting that way.
They don't, well, you can talk. They doubled down on the lies, and they won. So what can you do?
I want to move on from Brexit, if I may.
What? I've got nothing left.
Did you? Yeah, what's your big thing going to be next year? You're going to have to take on a whole new topic.
Yes.
What is Britain's best furniture polish? Is Mr. Sheen a busted flush? Do they still make that?
Muscle.
I'm a pledge man myself. Anyway, I want to talk about your podcast a bit, if I may.
Oh, good.
Because again, you see, there you go. You've taken. You're not the only podcast out there.
This is true.
And you're not the only interview podcast out there. But I enjoy listening to. I haven't heard all of them.
No.
But I enjoy listening to the ones I've heard. I think you're bringing something new and interesting to podcasts. No, that's the last nice thing I'm going to say.
That's all right. I'll take it.
But the thing I wanted to draw to listeners' attention is my experience of you, because I will often be in. You've just come off the air,
yes,
and from your radio show, and then you and what's your producer's name again?
Ava.
Ava, that's right. You and Ava are involved in this sort of pirouette before you record your podcast, and I see in you something I have often felt in myself before a big interview. You're just slightly clenched and tense, and you're twiddling with your facial hair. I can't do that, and Ava's doing the same. And there's just that slight anxiety.
Just for the record, she's twiddling with her own facial hair, is she?
Well, I wasn't specific.
Not sure what's more embarrassing from her perspective.
You're a very close team, that's all I'm saying. And there's just that unspoken tension and anxiety and worry, and you both clearly been working on this, and you've had your discussions, and then it's just that. And then in due course, 45 minutes, an hour later, whatever, you'll both come back, and there's just this release, which again I recognise from doing this long enough, this release and this joy. And even if something hasn't gone completely perfectly, you're just both up and happy and generally delighted and congratulating each other. And so I love seeing either end of that process, and then occasionally hearing the bit in the middle, which is much less interesting.
I think that's a lovely description of it, and entirely accurate. Apart from the bit about the bit in the middle, I wonder whether the nerves, like the big match nerves, there's a variety of reasons for them, but I'm not on the radio. I'm not frightened of silence anymore. In the context, I know, like me, you're a huge fan of Steve Allen's, and if we can learn anything from Steve, it's that you can actually keep the balloon not just inflated, but delighting the audience without any input but your own. So, I mean, oddly, when I started here, it was not unknown for it to be quite hard to get the phones to ring. So I used to be quite frightened of silence. Not good silence, when you leave an interviewee hanging for so long that people wonder whether they've passed away, but the silence that comes from running out of things to say. So when you're doing a big interview like that, whoever it may be, there's a slight, and it's a much longer format than we're used to on a radio programme, there's a slight worry in my mind that we might run out of things to talk about. It's usually the other way around. If you listen to the one with Ross Noble, supposed to be a brief life distilled into a 45 1 hour. With Ross, he hadn't even left school by the time we got to the end of the interview, because I just sat there like an audience.
His school
member.
days were so
His
fascinating.
school days were absolutely fascinating when they tied him to the clothesline and similar stories. So I think it's partly that. And then
you said, thank goodness it wasn't a rotating book.
you do listen to it. The other one, I think, is some of the names are big, and I get quite intimidated still. It's good to be a bit intimidated.
I mean, that Tony Blair business.
The Tony Blair
in the
one.
early days.
Yes, that was very... And that one, oddly, because it was quite short, and we knew from the beginning that it was going to be quite short, I was nervous, but I wasn't worried about silence. I was worried about not getting started. When Heseltine came in, I think I fluffed the top of that, because I was so keen to persuade him that I knew what I was talking about. I'd never interviewed Heseltine before. I did my A-level politics study on him and the Westland affair, and I haven't felt like that for a very long time. Almost chippy, almost as if I had to... I mean, it actually went very well in the end, but the first 2 or 3 minutes of it, I felt probably display the nerves that you described, which I don't think should make their way into the studio.
No, it didn't sound nervy. I mean, I saw your nerves, if that's what they were, and and admired them because I knew that you were about to do a good job, because I think one helps lead to the other.
I do as well. I do. So do actors, don't they? With stage fright and adrenaline and stuff like that.
I remember interviewing Tony Blair hundreds of years ago, and the thing I remember most vividly about it is I was sick. I was ill. I was in doing a Saturday programme on Radio 4, and I was due to be doing my programme on the Sunday morning, and I had, maybe it was man flu, but I was really, really bad. And I went in on the Saturday. It was 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And I thought, well, if I phone in sick, some poor soul's got to come in.
Cool.
So I'm just going to get through this. Most of Sunday's programme is in the bag. I'm just going to kind of talk like this throughout the programme, and it'll be fine. And then there was some political crisis. This was maybe 1998.
Okay.
So it was, early in the Blair premiership. And Alistair Campbell phoned our office and said, I want to go, Tony Blair's available for an interview for The World this weekend, tomorrow, which is the 1 o'clock show on Sunday. Unfortunately, they weren't doing a show. They'd managed to record something. So my little show on Sunday morning was the only thing available. And they went, all right then, can he come along and record something tonight? So the boss comes and says to me, Eddie, we've had Downing Street on the phone. Tony Blair wants to be interviewed at Chequers in a couple of hours. Would that be okay? Now, I'm sitting there. My head is in a complete fog. Nose streaming. I'm coughing. And I said, well, no, I don't really want to do it. But, of course, I had to do it.
Yeah.
And then found myself in a car going to Chequers.
Good grief.
And interviewed Tony Blair. And I've got no recollection.
Really?
Of that.
Did it in a haze?
I think it was okay.
Yes.
And Alistair Campbell was in the corner, harumphing.
Yes.
And Tony Blair could not have been nicer, and had a look around Chequers, I think. And got in a car.
night nurse high.
And then I woke up in the morning and thought, I think I interviewed him yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was scary. Whereas you were focused and got lots out of him.
Yeah, but I wasn't ill. I mean, it was I wouldn't want to do it on level playing field terms. I was adrenalised and nervous, and as you say, whether it's a slight social insecurity that you want people to like you, which I think we probably all suffer from a bit in this business, whether we realise it or not, or whether it's an intellectual insecurity and worrying that I don't know enough to ask this person meaningful questions. It applied with Heseltine and it applied with Blair as well. But Blair, it's the pauses, isn't it? I mean, you know with the pause that they're going through the shall I or shan't I answer this question. I remember asking Oprah Winfrey once.
Oh, sorry, let me just get a broom.
Clang! Long before. I mean, I'd love to do a longer interview with her, but it was
and
just.
I'm sure she feels the same.
It was just a junket, and asking her about being called the N-word, and she had spoken about it before, but not often. And I felt I'd done enough in the 10 minutes as we came to the end of our allotted time to chance my arm with that question. And you watch them thinking, not how am I going to answer this question, but am I going to answer this question?
And we're going to find out how she answered it in a moment. Hello again. You join us as James O'Brien is about to finish his Oprah Winfrey anecdote.
It's just a rubbish anecdote. I didn't know you were going to do it as a hook and tease. So you see her thinking, shall I go
Make
down?
something up.
So she told me about the first time that she was called the N-word, and it was really powerful radio.
Yeah.
And with Tony Blair, I thought before I went in, I mean, we'll do the stuff we have to do, and then we'll do the stuff you can't predict. But if you could ask him any question right now, what would it be? And I thought I'd really like to know whether he regrets rolling over a bit for the Daily Mail and Murdoch for actually packaging himself in such a way that they found palatable, because in many ways he was held hostage to that subsequently. You could even argue that it gives grist to the Corbynite mill that he was endorsed by both, or certainly by the Mail, and the pause there was long and meaningful, and the answer was therefore very, very interesting, I felt.
I'll tell you, one of the impressive things about Tony Blair is about 3 years after that interview, and he'd never met me before or since, and I wasn't doing a lot of telly at the time, and there was one morning I went into work and was waiting for a lift at Radio 2 for some reason, and the lift door opened, and there's the Prime Minister with Alistair Campbell, and Tony Blair, without missing a beat, and said, "Hi, Eddie, how are you?"
Class.
Now,
Clark.
Maybe he just remembers me from having the snot running down my nose.
Maybe he was a big fan of Broadcasting House and all your other work.
That'll
silly
be it.
sausage.
But he wouldn't. He wouldn't remember me to look at. This was years later.
Yeah,
anyway, I thought that was very impressive.
Yes, he's a class
Did he remember you?
He's a class act. Yes, he does.
You had your big name tag.
I did a thing just before the election.
James.
I hosted a thing for the what morphed out of the People's Vote movement, the final say, and so I'm on a stage with Tony Blair and Michael Heseltine. John Major has just delivered a video message, and of course, as Tony Blair is walking off the stage, and I reach out to shake him by the hand, I'm still a kid from Kidderminster thinking he's going to walk straight past me. He doesn't know who I am, but he did, thankfully.
And he said, "Hey, how's Eddie?"
He did. Yeah. Exactly. Is he feeling any better? He said.
Give the man a hanky. Now, because you've done all of that and moved in those circles, and you have influence and you've been influential, and okay, not enough people listened and did what you would have liked. I wonder whether your taste for that is such that you are going to do more of this in another forum.
I don't know. I think once I would have said definitely not. Whether I go into politics or would like to go into politics.
When you're in politics, I mean, face it.
As a politician rather than as a commentator. I felt for the Brexit duration that I was of more use describing than I was actually agitating, because you can do a bit of both. I don't know. My children are quite young. I certainly wouldn't want to expose them yet to anything akin to what...
Can't be more embarrassing than knowing you're on the radio.
Well, yeah, if only. It's you don't get followed down the street for being the child of a LBC presenter.
But do you have a lot of respect for politicians? Because I do.
Yes, I do. I mean, I don't think we can even talk about them in general terms, can they? Because I've got no respect at all for some of them, and some of them seem to have gone into it for either in absolutely incomprehensible or rather ugly reasons. But I have respect for people who put their head above the parapet in order to propose genuine beliefs and principles. I don't think I could admire more. I just worry that politics is populated now on both sides of the Atlantic, or at least the upper echelons are, by people who don't have any principles and who are in it for entirely different reasons. Self in it for rewards that are either material or, in the case of Donald Trump, or in the case of Boris Johnson, it's not a material reward, because he'd be a lot better off continuing to write columns for the Barclay Brothers and similar. But it's a status reward. It's a self-esteem reward. I don't know what his principles are. I don't know why he went into politics, except because he wanted to get his name on the honours board at Eton, following on from the 19 other prime ministers that went to the same school. So no, I don't admire all of them, but the ones that agitate for a world that would suit them less well are the ones I admire the most.
Has there ever been a prime minister from Kidderminster?
No, but you joke. Stanley Baldwin was from Bewdley, which is just up the road, as you know, just up the A456, over the River Severn, past the Black Boy on the left, and Stanley Baldwin's family home. There's a statue to Stanley, but also Charles de Gaulle spent some of his exile in Bewdley, which is just down the road.
This is all fit. I can see your campaign video already. You're in the back of the car like John Major in 1992. Is it still there? Yes, it is.
It's still there. When I was a kid, there was a gentleman who was a bit slow, I think, was the description we would have used at the time, who walked around Bewdley wearing a beret. And the local wisdom was that he was Charles de Gaulle's love child. Now, I think that was only based on the beret, but I don't know.
Well, as the old joke goes, berries are difficult. Patty Hearst couldn't pull one of those off, and she had money and a gun.
So no, there haven't been any prime ministers from Kidderminster yet. Well, Tom Watson grew up on the same street as me, so we've had a deputy leader of the Labour Party, but no prime ministers.
Yeah, it's all fitting together. You're a political biog.
It's all about Kidderminster.
Hello, I'm James O'Brien. You may remember me from such programmes as The James O'Brien Show.
James O'Brien Experience.
I want to be your Prime Minister.
Yes.
Let me tell you about my agenda for government. Overlap. Stranger things have happened. And I know you don't want to talk about this, which is why I keep talking about it. But in all seriousness, the influence you have, which has happened organically. I mean, it's happened because of the power of you and your programme. I'd be astonished if you didn't want to use that for another cause, for want of a better word.
Can I drop another name? Chris Evans said something very similar to me not long ago, and I don't quite get it yet. I mean, I'm incredibly touched and flattered that titans of your talent would say that, but I don't get it yet. I don't.
But I think it'll come. I think this Christmas break might be very interesting to you, because I think you know, the new year you might be reflecting. So what's next?
And well, look. My entire life, I've realised, is a sliding door moment. I only realised this when I was writing my book. Did I mention that? No. I only realised this when I was writing my book. It's because I'm adopted. So all my life, I have had in my mind somewhere, whether consciously or subconsciously, the James who didn't get adopted, right? The James who grew up either in care or with a less loving family, or even with his teenage single mum in straitened circumstances. He's always been with me. He's always been alongside me. And a lot of the time I've forgotten that or ignored that, but he's clearly always been there. So my politics is built upon creating a country in which he could achieve what I've been lucky enough to achieve. Because my parents gave me security and wealth and an exceptional and expensive education and aspirations and a belief that I could go anywhere. So my politics have always, and I didn't realise this until quite recently, been built upon a belief that it's not fair that I've got what I've got and the me who didn't get adopted wouldn't have got any of it. So yes, there is a proper political passion there within me, but I still don't know what the future holds. We've had a lot going on at home lately, and it focuses the mind on your priorities and what matters. And it's a luxury I can't currently afford is to look beyond the parameters of my own existence.
I think it'll be organic. I mean, I don't think you're going to have to force yourself into saying. I don't see you as thinking, "Oh, what am I going to do next?" That's not my impression of you. I just
I'd have to get bored first. I think, and there's no prospect of that happening anytime soon.
Well, they're keeping you busy.
Well, also, look, this radio station, when I started working here, if they'd said to me that we'd attract Eddie Mair, I'd have laughed in their face. If they'd said to me that we'd end up on the front cover of the Financial Times magazine for having rewritten the rules of...
By the way, why do you always have one ear off your headphones?
I thought everyone did. It's so that I can hear the room and hear the headphones.
Hold on a second, I'm going to do the same.
Does it not? Do you not feel a bit more
It's just us in the
moment?
room.
Well, yeah, but why are either of us wearing headphones then?
Well, that's a good point.
Those are the questions that have made me the man I am today.
But really, no. But I can understand the room if they were. But it's just.
Well, there often is. I guess it's a habit I got into very early on. I'm not entirely sure.
You were having your photograph taken by the Financial Times.
I realised
that. One ear off.
I realised that when you pointed it out in a tweet. I don't know why I did that. Hey man, we all need a trademark.
It's your thing.
It's my brand.
How much longer do we have to do? Minutes? No. In fairness to me, I was just trying to find a way of publicising the front cover.
Yes, well, there we are, and I'd realised that because I'm not as worried about seeming immodest as you. I was.
You had a book out.
I was happy just to go, wow, aren't we great? Look at us. Whereas you had to smuggle in the reference to the magazine cover by using my ear as camouflage.
Yeah, and then people would look at it.
They did.
Yeah,
indeed.
in their millions.
And it was an amazing thing. But as I say, there's no prospect of getting bored in this job anytime soon because it's as if we've moved from the Vauxhall Conference to the Premier League in the time I've been on the team.
How big do you think LBC will get?
It's an interesting period, isn't it? Because we've clearly benefited from the political instability and the lack of clarity and certainty, which presumably has offered some people a guiding hand, or you imagine it will continue to grow because all of the other media is going to suffer from the same condition that I've just described. But I don't know. When Richard Park, who was the director of programming right across the empire, when Global Radio came into existence, when he said to us that we should have Radio 4 in our sites, I thought he needed to lie down in a darkened room. I don't think that now.
No, it is astonishing. It is your achievement, and I mean, I'm a very Johnny-come-lately, but it's your achievement and everybody else's. And I've watched it grow from a distance, just full of admiration. And I wonder... I was listening to David Dimbleby's podcast called The Sun King about Rupert Murdoch, and one section of that is obviously about the rise of The Sun, the newspaper, and how the Daily Mirror had 5 million sales, and you're a newspaper man.
Yes,
the Daily Mirror had 5 million, and The Sun, he took over The Sun, and it had something like 800,000, and the goal was to overhaul the Mirror, and everyone laughed.
And they laughed at him.
And it's obviously not a direct comparison, but these seismic changes do happen.
Yes.
And when you're in the middle of them, it's sometimes hard to see.
It is, and it may not be an unalloyed good thing for the bigger picture, because we're clearly driven by opinion in a way that the BBC can't be. And I do worry, oddly, that a lot of my problems with the BBC are built upon their obsession with putting two sides of an argument forward, which in the context of an individual programme we don't really have to do, but in the context of a whole day's output we do. So which way are people supposed to turn? The BBC in the good old days provided objectivity, and now it doesn't, sadly. I mean, the news bulletins do, and most of the correspondents do, and the big presenters like Hugh Edwards and his colleagues do, but for those who have to referee interviews, I don't know that they seem to struggle with not knowing what impartiality is. We benefit hugely from knowing exactly what impartiality is and not being individually required to display it.
Did you have fun doing Newsnight? I hated walking on the set and talking. I was terrible
Did
at
you?
that. Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't like... I'm not very good on telly in the things that matter most visually. I just call myself a minger.
The sound is wonderful. But
my mum would say I've got awful posture, and she's right. And
you just sat up a bit there when you said
I did
that.
sit, and obviously, I had to trim my beard a lot more and make sure my hair was cut. But yeah, towards the end, I was loving it. It was like being in a Formula One car because of the team that you had. Now, I love LBC because we can move so quickly and so tightly, because we're not a big machine. But I also really enjoyed driving a car for a massive machine.
Those people who polish your shoes in the evening before you go on,
especially
that's their only job.
While you're live on air. It was initially quite distracting. It's a police academy moment. But no, I loved it, and walking away from Newsnight was really, really difficult. But as you understand, I had no choice. You couldn't carry on doing what I do here, or even on Twitter, when the BBC political programmes demand impartiality. Of course, if only I could have found some billionaires to pay me to publish a magazine, I'd have been absolutely fine.
You've got another book in you?
I have. Yeah, well, I have to, yeah. I'm halfway through spending the advance.
Or was it a two-book deal?
No. It's the advance I got for the second book is a result of the success of the first book, which puts all sorts of pressure on people. But yeah, I'm going to write a book about everything I've been wrong about. I think modesty demands it after calling my first book How to Be Right.
Well, that wouldn't take long then, he said supportively.
You're very sweet. There's lots of things I've been wrong about. The problem I've got, if you're interested, this is my weekend. The problem I've got is it's possible at the moment, and I hope my publisher isn't listening, that apart from establishing what I was wrong about, the rest of the chapter, which explains how I realised I was wrong and how I managed to get myself, is going to be identical for every single issue, which is not going to make for a very riveting read.
Out next Christmas, order early.
How Not to Be Wrong by James O'Brien.
Thank you very much. Good luck with everything that comes next.